It was a cold winter morning when we moved into Diane's spacious two-story house. I remember looking around, thinking how lucky we were to be offered such a generous helping hand. "Megan, isn't this wonderful? Mum's house is big enough for all of us, and Lily will have so much space to play," Jason said as he unloaded our things. I nodded, holding our little Lily close to me. "It's a kind gesture, Jason. It'll help us, especially with Lily's condition and my work," I replied, genuinely grateful. Diane appeared at the door, smiling. "I hope you'll be comfortable here. I thought it would be easier for Lily and, well, for all of us to be together," she said. "Thank you, Diane. It means a lot to us," I replied. The first few weeks seemed perfect. Diane would sometimes cook our favorite meals, and Jason would often return from work with a bright smile, knowing we were all under one roof. But as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I began to feel a change in the air. One day, while I was on my laptop in the living room working on an important project, Diane walked in, commenting, "Another day of leisure for you, huh?" I was taken aback. "I'm working, Diane," I said. She chuckled, staring at the screen. "Isn't work, dear. In my time, work meant getting your hands dirty," she said before leaving. Before I could reply, Jason walked in. "Mom, Megan's job is different, but I get it. It's hard to understand," he said. I thought he was defending me, but his tone hinted otherwise. Later that evening, when Lily was in bed, I tried talking to Jason. "Did you mean what you said earlier about my job being hard to understand?" I asked. He shrugged. "I mean, you're always at home. It does look like you have a lot of free time," he said. Jason's comment stung. Just because I work from home doesn't mean I'm not working. "My job is demanding," I replied. "I didn't mean it that way. It's just, different," he said. That night I lay in bed reflecting on the changes. It wasn't just Diane's passive-aggressive comments or Jason's growing indifference, it was the house. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. What I once saw as a haven was now becoming a cage. Days blended into each other, and the undercurrent of tension grew. Diane's snide remarks about my job became a daily affair, and Jason seemed more distant than ever. One Friday evening, after tucking Lily into bed, I decided to take a look at our joint bank account. Jason and I had always maintained transparency in our finances, pooling our incomes and sharing expenses. The routine check was just to ensure that we were sticking to our savings plan, especially with the mounting medical expenses for Lily. However, as I logged into our account, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The available balance was much lower than I expected. Curious, I clicked on the statement to see a list of transactions. My eyes widened as I saw several large withdrawals for Party Central and numerous purchases from Shop on Couch premium package. I felt a mix of confusion and anger. Pulling out a notepad, I quickly jotted down the figures. Over the past few months, there had been a substantial drain on our savings, and none of it was for household expenses or Lily's medical needs. The next morning, I approached Jason. "We need to talk about our account," I said. He looked up from his cereal. "What about it?" "We've been spending a lot more than we budgeted for, and what's this Party Central and Shop on Couch premium package?" I asked, showing him the figures I jotted down. "Oh, that," he replied nonchalantly. "The guys and I have been going out on Fridays, just to relax and unwind. It's nothing big. And the shopping channel." I pressed on, trying to keep my voice steady. Diane, overhearing our conversation, stepped into the room. "Oh, that's just some stuff I ordered. I saw some nice things on TV." "We can't afford these right now," I said, trying to reason with them. "It's just a few things, Megan. Why are you overreacting?" Diane snapped back. "I'm not overreacting," I retorted. "We have shared expenses, and we need to save for Lily's needs. We can't spend recklessly. Jason sighed. Look, I need some time with my friends, and Mom likes those TV products. What's the big deal? It's not like you don't spend. I spend on essentials, I shot back. Not on parties and unnecessary things, Diane scoffed. You make it sound like we're burning through cash. It's not a crime to indulge once in a while. But every week, I exclaimed, my voice raising. The room was thick with tension. Neither Jason nor Diane seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. Our savings, which were meant to ensure a secure future for us, were being frittered away. It was clear that our views on finances were vastly different. Diane's careless spending and Jason's nonchalant attitude were alarming. I realized that the promise of a shared future based on mutual understanding and respect was beginning to crumble. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust and shared responsibilities. I walked away feeling more isolated than ever. The reality of our situation was becoming clearer by the day, and the once harmonious house was now filled with discord and resentment. One evening after work, I decided to treat myself to something I hadn't done in a long time, shopping. I headed to a nearby boutique, and after browsing for a bit, I spotted a gorgeous dress. It was simple yet elegant, perfect for an upcoming work event. As I checked the price tag, I hesitated for a moment. It was slightly over my usual budget for clothing, but then I thought of the hard work I'd put in, the hours spent on projects, and the recent bonus I'd received. I deserved this, feeling a sense of joy I hadn't felt in a while. I purchased the dress and headed home, excited to show Jason and hoping it would bridge the growing gap between us. However, my excitement quickly faded when I walked into the living room. Diane and Jason were sitting on the couch, engrossed in a TV show. I cleared my throat. Hey, look what I got for the work event next week, as I pulled out the dress. Diane's eyes immediately zeroed in on the price tag. That seems expensive, she remarked. It's a bit more than usual, but it's for a special event, I explained, hoping for some support from Jason. But Jason just looked at the dress and said, Did we really have the money for this? Feeling cornered, I replied, It's from my bonus. I thought it'd be okay. Diane scoffed. After making such a fuss about our expenses, you go and buy this? Jason chimed in. Mom's right. You lecture us about saving and then go on a shopping spree. It's just one dress, Jason, I exclaimed, my voice rising. I work hard, too. Can I treat myself once in a while? Diane's voice dripped with sarcasm. Sure, while the rest of us tighten our belts. The joy I had felt moments ago was now replaced with humiliation and anger. I couldn't believe that after all the reckless spending on their part, they were criticizing me for one purchase. I retreated to our room, clutching the dress, feeling more alone than ever. The dress, which was meant to be a symbol of my accomplishments, now felt like a burden. Lily's health had always been fragile, and on this particular week she came down with a high fever. I took some days off work to care for her, but on Thursday I received an urgent call. My boss needed me in the office for an essential presentation. I was in a dilemma. I couldn't leave Lily alone. I approached Diane, hoping she would understand. Diane, I have a request. Can you please watch over Lily? Jason or I have a crucial meeting at work. Diane looked up from her magazine, clearly annoyed. Again, why can't you handle your work without leaving your sick child? I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, I pleaded. She sighed dramatically. Fine, but just this once, relieved. I thanked her and went to inform Jason about the plan. Diane has agreed to watch Lily, Jason. Can you come home early just to make sure everything's okay? Jason, who was scrolling through his phone, seemed distracted. Sure, I'll try, he replied. The next day, as I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Diane. "Sorry, dear. My friends just called. They want to meet up. I can't watch Lily today." Panicking, I called Jason. "Can you come home? Diane can't watch Lily." There was a long pause before he replied. "Megan, I can't. I've got a lot going on today." "Diane promised she would, and now she's bailing. I need your help," I implored. He sighed. Okay, I'll leave work early, but you owe me one." Relieved, I quickly got dressed and left for work. Hours later, as I was wrapping up the presentation, I received a call from the school's nurse. "Mrs. Johnson, Lily's fever has spiked. She's in a lot of distress." My heart raced. "I'll be there right away." When I arrived at the school, the sight of my little girl, flushed and in tears, broke my heart. I wrapped her in my arms and tried to soothe her. Why wasn't she at home? Where was Diane or Jason? I thought furiously. Upon reaching home, I found the house empty. Hours later, Jason strolled in, the smell of alcohol strong on his breath. "Where were you?" I demanded. Jason blinked in confusion. "What? I told I'd come home early, but the guys wanted to hang out." "So you promised," I shouted. "Lily was alone and unwell. Do you even care?" Diane entered the scene looking displeased. "What's all this noise?" "Lily was left alone. She was sick, and neither of you were there," I cried, holding back tears. Diane rolled her eyes. "You always make a scene. She's just a kid. She'll bounce back." I was at my wit's end. "This is not a home," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I can't do this any more." Jason looked taken aback. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this isn't working. We need to make changes," I said, my voice firm. The room was thick with tension. Diane looked smug, while Jason seemed confused. As for me, it was clear. This was the breaking point. Things had to change. The days that followed were filled with introspection. Seeing Lily so vulnerable had shaken me deeply, and I spent hours contemplating our future. The house was eerily quiet, the tension palpable. One evening, as I was sitting in my room, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Lily. She climbed onto the bed beside me, her tiny face solemn. "Mommy, why is everyone so sad?" I took a deep breath, holding back my tears. "Sometimes adults have disagreements, sweetie." I hugged her tighter. "I don't like it. I want everyone to be happy." Her innocent words struck a chord. I realized I had to make a change, not just for my well-being, but for Lily's future. The next morning, I met with a lawyer to discuss the possibility of a divorce. As we spoke, it became evident that while the journey wouldn't be easy, it was necessary. A few days later, I mustered up the courage to talk to Jason. "We need to talk," I began, my voice shaking. He looked up from his laptop. "About us, this situation," I replied, motioning around the house. He sighed. "Not this again." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Jason, I've decided to file for divorce." He looked at me stunned. "You're overreacting. We just hit a rough patch." "It's more than that," I replied, my voice firm. "I can't raise Lily in this environment. She deserves better." He looked away. "So you're just giving up on us?" "I'm choosing what's best for Lily and me." There was a long pause before he finally spoke. "Fine, if that's what you want," I nodded. "It's what's needed." The following week, as I was packing our belongings, Diane entered the room. She looked at the boxes and scoffed. "Running away?" I looked at her, starting fresh. She smirked. "You think you'll manage on your own?" "For Lily, I'll manage anything." I replied with determination. Diane just huffed and left the room. The day we moved out was emotional. The house that once held dreams and promises was now just a painful reminder of what was lost. As I locked the door for the last time, I looked back, a mix of sadness and hope in my heart. Lily held my hand. It'll be okay, right, Mommy? I smiled at her. Yes, sweetie, we'll be just fine. Our new apartment was cozy and small, nestled in a quiet neighborhood. I remember the first night we moved in. Boxes were strewn everywhere, and I had just managed to set up Lily's bed. As we lay there listening to the sounds of the city outside, she whispered, "I like it here, Mommy." I kissed her forehead. "Me too, sweetie. It's our new beginning." The next few weeks were busy. I juggled work and setting up our new home, making sure Lily felt settled and secure. My work colleagues were supportive, especially my boss, who often checked in to see how we were doing. One evening, as I was making dinner, there was a knock on the door. Opening it, I was met with the smiling face of our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a kind elderly lady. She held out a freshly baked pie. "Thought you two could use a warm welcome," I smiled, touched by her gesture. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson, that's really sweet." She winked. "Just call me June, and any time, dear." The community around us was warm and welcoming. Slowly the shadows of our past began to fade as Lily and I got involved in various activities. Lily joined a dance class and made new friends, while I discovered a local book club where I met like-minded individuals. One evening, as Lily and I sat on our balcony, she looked up at me. "Mommy, do you think Daddy misses us?" The question took me by surprise. I sighed, choosing my words carefully. "I'm sure he does, in his own way." She nodded. "I sometimes miss the big house." I pulled her close. "But do you like it here?" She smiled. "Yes, I have new friends, and Mrs. Patterson gives me cookies." We both laughed. Life wasn't without its challenges. Managing finances, ensuring Lily's needs were met, and balancing work was tough, but I took each day as it came. I began to get a grip on our expenses, started saving, and even dabbled in some investments. My background in finance certainly came in handy. One day I received a call from an old college friend, Mark. "Megan, it's been ages. How have you been?" We chatted for a while, catching up on old times. Mark was now part of a startup, and they were looking for investors. The project seemed promising, and after some thorough research, I decided to invest. To my surprise, the venture took off, and the returns were beyond my expectations. Suddenly, our financial situation changed for the better. But more than the money, it was the sense of accomplishment that meant the world. One evening, June invited us over for dinner. As we sat around her dining table, she looked at me with a twinkle in her eye. "You've done well, Megan. I admire your strength." I smiled. "Thank you, June. It's been a journey." She nodded. "And it's just the beginning." Looking at Lily, who was busy with her dessert, I realized she was right. We had faced our fair share of challenges, but we had also found our path. This was indeed a new beginning. A few months after my new beginning, life had found a rhythm, and every day felt like a blessing. Then, out of the blue, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Jason. "Hello, Jason," I greeted cautiously. "Megan." His voice sounded odd, a mix of false cheer and underlying desperation. "How have you been?" "I've been well, thanks. And you?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine interest. There was a pause. "I've been thinking, Megan, maybe we were too hasty in our decisions. What do you say about giving us another chance?" I was taken aback. "Why now?" He hesitated. "Well, I've heard things are going well for you financially. We could support each other, you know." The implication was clear. I remembered the joint account and how my earnings were treated as our money, while his wasteful expenditures were never discussed. I decided to play along. "How's Lily? Have you been keeping tabs on her health?" "Oh, she's your responsibility now, isn't she?" he replied dismissively, confirming my worst suspicions. "Look, Megan, Mom and I have had some bad luck. We've burned through our savings and have some debt. So you thought you'd return to the safety net you abandoned? I replied coldly. He tried to laugh it off. Oh, come on, Megan, families stick together, right? Not when the family abandons one of their own, I retorted. There was silence on the line. So you won't consider my offer, Jason? You've made your choices and I've made mine. I've learned my worth, and it's not as a safety net for someone who never valued me. The city skyline was a mesmerizing sight from the expansive windows of my new office. With a recent promotion, I had moved to the top floor, and the view was symbolic of how far I'd come. My work, once dismissed as mere internet stuff, was now at the forefront of the company's operations. A chime from my computer alerted me to a new email, and I was pleased to find it was a congratulatory note from the CEO on the success of my latest project. While I was immersed in my work, my colleague Jenny walked in with a cheeky grin, holding a tablet. "Have you seen this, Megan?" It was a local news article. My ex-husband's face was on it, along with a story about the foreclosure of their house due to mounting debts. The article mentioned how he had spiraled after our divorce with lavish spending habits that he could no longer maintain. Jenny raised an eyebrow. "Didn't see that coming, did you?" I sighed. No one should have to go through that, but he made his choices. He's lost most of his friends, too, apparently. He can't finance their Friday night parties anymore. That didn't surprise me. Those friends were around only for the good times, drawn to the allure of freebies and luxurious parties anyway. Jenny changed the topic. "Heard you're being considered for another project, the European expansion." I nodded, smiling. Yes, I'm prepping for it. It's going to be challenging but exciting. Jenny left, and I took a break, stepping out onto the balcony attached to my office. The breeze felt calming, and as I looked down, I saw the coffee shop where I had last seen my ex-mother-in-law. She was animatedly talking to her circle of friends, probably recounting embellished tales about how heartless I was for not extending a helping hand to them in their time of need. I could have felt bitter or angry, but I didn't. I had shed the weight of their toxic influence, and now I was soaring, both professionally and personally. That evening, as I picked up Lily from her after-school class, her teacher, Mrs. Allen, approached me. "Megan, I must say Lily's resilience and strength are commendable. She's an excellent student and a joy to have in class." "Thank you, Mrs. Allen. She's my rock," I replied, beaming with pride. As we drove home, Lily chatted about her day. "Mom, we learned about caterpillars turning into butterflies today. They go through so much change." I smiled at her. Yes, and sometimes change is necessary to become something beautiful.
I pulled up to the house I had called home for over 30 years, and my heart sank. The familiar colonial-style facade was gone, replaced by sleek modern lines and a fresh coat of gray paint. A massive for sale sign stood defiantly on the perfectly manicured lawn. "Dennis, what's going on? I didn't authorize this!" I exclaimed as he emerged from the front door, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Relax, Maggie. You should have been here. Now it's out of our hands," he replied dismissively, waving a hand towards the renovated property. My mind raced, trying to process the jarring changes. This was my family's home, filled with memories and history. How could he make such drastic decisions without consulting me? As I stepped inside, the gut punch intensified. Gone were the warm, familiar tones and furnishings I had carefully curated over the years. In their place, a stark, minimalist design that felt cold and unwelcoming. "Mom's been a godsend overseeing the whole project," Dennis said, his tone almost mocking. "She knows what's best for us." There she was, my mother-in-law Joan, surveying the transformed space with a self-satisfied smirk. "It was time for an update, Maggie. This place was stuck in the past, just like you." Her words stung, but I bit my tongue. After months of caring for my ailing parents, I didn't have the energy for another battle with Joan's passive-aggressive jabs. "Where are my things?" I asked, dreading the answer. We had to make room for the new look, Joan replied dismissively. Don't worry, we kept a few sentimental pieces in storage. Storage? My stomach churned at the thought of my cherished belongings, collected over a lifetime, carelessly packed away. As I wandered through the hollow, unfamiliar rooms, an overwhelming sense of betrayal washed over me. This was no longer my home. It was a staged set, stripped of warmth and soul. In the kitchen, I found Dennis poring over paperwork with a young, attractive woman I didn't recognize. They looked up, their expressions a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Maggie, you're back early," Dennis stammered. "This is Sarah, our realtor. She's been invaluable in getting the house ready for market." Sarah extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile saccharine sweet. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Margaret. Dennis has told me so much about you." I forced a tight smile, my mind reeling. Ready for market? They were selling my family's home without my consent? As Sarah droned on about staging and curb appeal, I tuned her out, my gaze fixed on Dennis. His eyes averted mine, and in that moment, I realized the depth of his deception. This wasn't just about the house. It was a calculated betrayal, orchestrated by Dennis and enabled by his ever-controlling mother. A cold, sinking feeling gripped me as I recognized the true extent of how little they valued my input or respected my place in this family. I had been naive, blind to the cracks forming in the foundation of my life. But now, the veil had been lifted, and I saw the harsh reality staring back at me. This was no longer my home. It was a battlefield, and I would have to fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I sat numbly on the edge of the bed in the guest room, my mind replaying the events of the day like a broken record. How could Dennis do this to me, to us? After 30 years of marriage, of building a life together, he had thrown it all away without a second thought. As the shock began to subside, a familiar ache settled in my chest, the dull ache of disappointment I had grown accustomed to over the years. I should have seen the signs, the subtle shifts in his behavior that I had chosen to ignore, desperate to cling to the illusion of the perfect family. Dennis had always been distant, more focused on his work and hobbies than on cultivating our relationship. But I had foolishly believed that was just his way, that deep down he still loved and cherished me. Now the truth was laid bare. I had simply been a convenient accessory in his life, easily discarded when something shinier came along. And Joan, my own mother-in-law, the woman who should have been my closest ally, had been the architect of this betrayal all along. Her constant belittling, her snide remarks about my capabilities as a wife and mother, they had all been carefully calculated jabs, chipping away at my self-worth until I was too broken to fight back. Tears stung my eyes as I remembered the countless times I had defended her to my own family, making excuses for her behavior. She's just old-fashioned, I would say. She means well, deep down. But the truth was, Joan had never accepted me as part of her family. To her, I was an interloper, a threat to the twisted, codependent bond she shared with her son. The sound of laughter from downstairs snapped me back to reality. Dennis and Joan, celebrating their victory over me, no doubt reveling in the spoils of their deception. My fists clenched involuntarily, a surge of anger replacing the sadness that had consumed me moments before. I thought of my parents, the way their faces had lit up when Dennis and I had first brought them to this house, our forever home. They had trusted him, believed in the life we were building together, and now their legacy, the home they had gifted us out of love, was being sold off like a piece of merchandise, all for Dennis's selfish gain. A renewed sense of determination washed over me. I would not let them win. Not this time. Rising from the bed, I began to gather my things, my mind already formulating a plan. First, I needed evidence, proof of Dennis's misdeeds that not even Joan could deny or spin in her favor. Then, I would rally my troops, the friends and family who had stood by me through thick and thin, the ones who had always seen through Joan's false pretenses. This was war, and I would fight with everything I had to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my home, my dignity, my life. Dennis and Joan had made the mistake of underestimating me, of believing I would simply roll over and accept their betrayal. Well, they were in for a rude awakening. As I zipped up my suitcase, a small, defiant smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to show them just how strong I could be when pushed to my limits. This was only the beginning. I stared at the suitcase on the bed, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. Part of me wanted nothing more than to flee, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the toxic web of lies that had ensnared my life. But another part, the part that had been beaten down and gaslit for years, hesitated. Could I really just walk away from everything I had built? A familiar voice in the back of my mind whispered insidiously, "This is your fault, Maggie. If you had been a better wife, a better daughter-in-law, none of this would have happened." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to drown out the voice that sounded eerily like Joan's. That wretched woman had spent decades chipping away at my self-worth, always quick with a backhanded compliment or subtle jab about my shortcomings. And Dennis, my so-called partner, had stood idly by, letting her toxic influence fester until it had poisoned our entire relationship. Flashes of memory assaulted me, moments I had tried so hard to forget. Joan criticizing my cooking at family dinners, her thin lips curled in a perpetual sneer. Dennis brushing off my concerns about her behavior, insisting I was overreacting, the way she had swooped in like a vulture when my parents fell ill, insinuating that I was an ungrateful daughter for needing to care for them. "If you cared enough about your own family, you wouldn't leave for months, Maggie," she had said, her voice dripping with false concern. At the time, I had bitten my tongue, too overwhelmed by the situation to stand up for myself. But now the memory ignited a spark of defiance deep within me. How dare she question my devotion to my family when she had spent years actively undermining and sabotaging my relationships? I thought of my parents, their faces etched with worry as I had left to tend to their recovery. They had trusted Dennis, believed that he would support me through that difficult time. Little did they know, he had used my absence as an opportunity to further his own selfish agenda, aided and abetted by his manipulative mother. A renewed sense of determination washed over me. I would not let them win. Not this time. If Dennis and Joan wanted a war, then a war they would get. Zipping up the suitcase with a decisive tug, I squared my shoulders and headed for the door. There would be no more running, no more hiding. It was time to gather my troops and fight for what was rightfully mine. My home, my family, my life. As I descended the stairs, I could hear Joan's shrill voice echoing from the kitchen, no doubt berating Dennis for his latest failure. A small, grim smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. They had no idea what was coming. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Then, with a newfound sense of purpose, I strode towards the kitchen, ready to face my adversaries head-on. No more Mrs. Nice Maggie. It was time to take back control of my life, no matter what it took. I strode into the kitchen, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and determination. There they were, Dennis and Joan, seated at the table like a pair of co-conspirators, their expressions a blend of smugness and disdain. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter-in-law," Joan sneered, her thin lips curling into a familiar sneer, "to what do we owe the pleasure of your presence?" Before I could respond, Dennis cut in, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have no idea what we've been through, managing everything you abandoned." He gestured broadly at the newly renovated space around us. "We had to take matters into our own hands." I felt my hands ball into fists at my sides as I surveyed the changes they had made to my home. Our home. Gone were the warm, inviting tones and cherished family heirlooms I had carefully curated over the years. In their place, a cold, sterile aesthetic that felt utterly devoid of personality or sentiment. "Where are my things?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. Joan waved a dismissive hand. "We need to move on, Maggie. This house isn't yours to hold us back any longer." Her words hit me like a physical blow, and in that moment the full weight of their betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. They had not only disrespected me, but they had desecrated the very legacy my parents had entrusted to us, the home they had gifted us out of love and trust. Rage bubbled up from deep within me, a primal, visceral fury that I had never experienced before. How dare they? How dare they trample on everything that was sacred, everything that had once been so precious to our family? "You had no right," I seethed, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. "This was never just your decision to make." Dennis scoffed, leaning back in his chair with an infuriating air of nonchalance. "Don't be so dramatic, Maggie. It's just a house. We're doing what's best for our future." "Our future?" I echoed incredulously. "Or yours, Dennis? Yours and that little tramp you've been sneaking around with?" His eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of fear cross his features. Joan, however, remained unmoved, her expression hardening into a mask of cold indifference. "So you figured it out," she said coolly. "I must say I'm surprised it took you this long. You were always a bit slow on the uptake, weren't you, dear?" Her words were like a slap in the face, but I refused to let her see how deeply they stung. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and met her icy gaze head-on. "It's time you realized, Maggie, that you were never truly part of this family," she continued, her voice laced with venom. "You were always an outsider, a mere accessory to be tolerated for Dennis's sake." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. The years of subtle jabs and undermining, the way they had so easily cast me aside the moment I became an inconvenience, it had all been part of their twisted game, a slow, methodical erosion of my sense of self-worth and belonging. But no more. I would not be their victim, their punching bag, any longer. "You're wrong, Joan," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "This family, this legacy, it's mine just as much as it is yours, and I'll be damned if I let you destroy it for your own selfish gains." Dennis opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him with a single withering glare. "Don't bother, Dennis. The lies end here. I know everything. About your affair, about the way you've been squandering my inheritance to fund your mistress's little business ventures. It's all going to come out, one way or another." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Joan's eyes, a crack in her carefully constructed facade of indifference. She knew, deep down, that I had finally found the strength to fight back, and that terrified her more than anything. A small, triumphant smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. The battle lines had been drawn, and for once I held the upper hand. This was only the beginning of their reckoning. The smug looks on Dennis and Joan's faces quickly faded as the weight of my words sank in. I could see the fear flickering in their eyes, the realization that I was no longer the meek, compliant woman they had grown accustomed to controlling. How did you find out?" Dennis sputtered, his bravado crumbling under the intensity of my gaze. "Did you really think you could keep it all a secret forever?" I scoffed. "The shady financial dealings, the late nights at the office, it was only a matter of time before the truth came out." Joan's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin, disapproving line. "So you've been snooping through our affairs, have you? How typical of you, Maggie, to resort to such underhanded tactics." I leveled my gaze at her, refusing to be cowed by her condescending tone. "Don't try to play the victim here, Joan. You're just as guilty as Dennis in all of this." Turning to my husband, I felt a surge of disgust and betrayal rise up within me. "How could you do this to me, Dennis? To our family? After everything we've been through together, how could you throw it all away for her?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them, the hurt and anger I had bottled up for so long finally spilling over. Was I not enough for you? Did our marriage, our vows mean nothing to you? Dennis opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "No, don't bother trying to explain it away. I know all about your little fling with Sarah, the real estate agent you've been using to funnel my inheritance into her business ventures." Joan's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of genuine surprise cross her features. Clearly, even she hadn't been privy to the full extent of Dennis's deception. "That's right," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I know about the shady deals, the secret accounts, all of it. And I have proof." Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a thick manila envelope stuffed with financial records, copies of incriminating emails, and other damning evidence I had painstakingly gathered over the past few weeks. You see, while you two were busy plotting behind my back, I was doing a little digging of my own. And what I found was a web of lies and betrayal that goes deeper than I ever could have imagined. Dennis's face had drained of color, his eyes darting nervously between me and the envelope in my hands. Joan, however, remained stubbornly defiant, her chin jutting out in a show of false bravado. "So what?" she sneered. "You have a few pieces of paper. That doesn't change the fact that you were never truly part of this family, Maggie. You were always an outsider, a mere accessory to be tolerated for Dennis's sake." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. Instead, I met her gaze head-on, my resolve unwavering. "You're wrong, Joan," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "This family, this legacy, it's mine just as much as it is yours, and I'll be damned if I let you destroy it for your own selfish gains." A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of my words settling over us like a thick fog. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had frozen, the three of us locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, without warning, Joan's composure cracked. Her face contorted into a mask of rage, and she slammed her fist down on the table with surprising force. "How dare you?" she spat, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? With accusations and threats?" I held her gaze, unflinching. "I'm not threatening anyone, Joan. I'm simply stating the facts. And the fact is, you and Dennis have betrayed me in the worst possible way. But it ends here, today. No more lies, no more secrets." Turning to Dennis, I felt a pang of sadness mixed with resolve. "I loved you, Dennis. Truly, I did. But this—" I gestured around the cold, sterile room that had once been our warm, inviting home. "This is too much. You've crossed a line that can never be uncrossed." His eyes pleaded with me, silently begging for forgiveness, but I had made up my mind. There was no going back, not after everything that had happened. "It's over," I said, my voice heavy with finality. "The life we had, the dreams we shared, it's all gone, Dennis, and you have no one to blame but yourself." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving them to stew in the wreckage of their own making. It was time to start anew, to rebuild my life on my own terms, without the constant weight of their manipulation and betrayal holding me back. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, a sense of liberation washed over me. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free, and I would savor every moment of it. The weight of Dennis and Joan's betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders as I left the house that had once been my home. But even in the depths of my anger and hurt, a newfound sense of determination burned within me. I would not let them break me, not after everything they had put me through. My first stop was the storage unit where Joan had so carelessly stashed away my belongings. As I rifled through the haphazardly packed boxes, a wave of emotion washed over me. These weren't just material possessions. They were pieces of my life, memories and mementos that had been so callously discarded. Gently, I lifted out a faded photograph, its edges worn and creased from years of handling. It was a picture of my parents on their wedding day, beaming with joy and hope for the future that lay ahead of them. A lump formed in my throat as I traced the outline of their faces, my heart aching for the trust they had placed in Dennis, a trust he had so thoroughly shattered. Tucking the photograph safely into my bag, I continued my search, unearthing more treasures from the past. Old love letters from Dennis, souvenirs from our travels, even the tattered stuffed bear he had won for me at a carnival on our first date. Each item was a poignant reminder of the love we had once shared, a love that had been slowly poisoned by Joan's insidious influence and Dennis's own selfishness. But amidst the pain and heartache, a newfound sense of resolve took root within me. These mementos were not just reminders of what I had lost. They were proof of the life I had built, the sacrifices I had made, and the strength that had carried me through even the darkest of times. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began to gather the evidence I would need to expose Dennis and Joan's lies. Financial records, incriminating emails, anything that could shed light on the depth of their betrayal. As I pored over the documents, a clearer picture began to emerge, one of greed, manipulation, and utter disregard for the sanctity of our marriage. It was then that I knew what I had to do. I would not simply walk away and lick my wounds. No, I would fight back, rallying the support of those who had stood by me through thick and thin, those who had seen the truth of Dennis and Joan's actions long before I had been willing to open my eyes. One by one, I reached out to my closest friends and family members, laying bare the painful truth of what had transpired. And one by one, they rallied to my side, offering not just their sympathy, but their unwavering support and loyalty. I always knew there was something off about that woman, my oldest friend Beth spat, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "Just say the word, Maggie, and I'll make sure the whole town knows what kind of snakes they really are." Others echoed her sentiments, sharing their own stories of Joan's manipulative behavior and Dennis's increasingly erratic actions. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and suddenly, the pieces all fell into place. "I've been naive, yes," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "But underestimating me is their biggest mistake." As the days passed, my network of allies grew stronger, each person bringing their own unique perspective and insights to the table. Together, we pieced together a damning portrait of Dennis and Joan's misdeeds, a tapestry of lies and deceit that would be impossible to ignore or refute. And through it all, a newfound sense of strength and resilience took root within me. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden woman who had allowed herself to be controlled and belittled for far too long. No, I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her sense of self-worth. As I looked around at the faces of those who had rallied to my side, I felt a surge of gratitude and determination. This was no longer just about me. It was about standing up for what was right, about refusing to let the toxic influence of people like Joan and Dennis poison the lives of others. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and turned to face the battle ahead. It was time to take the fight to them, to expose their lies and their betrayal for all the world to see. And this time I would not be silenced or cowed. This time I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. As I stood before the gathered crowd of family and friends, a hush fell over the room, all eyes fixed on me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. "I know there have been rumors circulating, whispers of discord within our family, and today I'm going to lay bare the truth, no matter how painful it may be." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on, undeterred. For too long I've been a victim of manipulation and betrayal at the hands of those closest to me. My own husband, Dennis, and his mother, Joan, have conspired against me, trampling on the sanctity of our marriage and our family for their own selfish gains. Gasps of shock and disbelief echoed through the room, but I refused to falter. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim the dignity and respect that had been so cruelly stripped away from me. "It's true," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Dennis has been carrying on an affair with a younger woman, using my own inheritance to fund her business ventures behind my back." Turning to face my husband, I felt a surge of righteous anger coursing through my veins. "How could you, Dennis? How could you betray everything we built together, everything we sacrificed for this family?" He opened his mouth to speak, but I silenced him with a single, withering glare. "And you, Joan," I said, shifting my gaze to my mother-in-law's stony expression. "You were supposed to be my ally, my support system. Instead, you enabled and encouraged Dennis's betrayal, driven by your own twisted, possessive love for your son." Joan's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a familiar sneer. "How dare you speak to me like that, you ungrateful little—" "Enough," I thundered, cutting her off mid-sentence. "I've endured your insults, your belittling, for far too long, but no more. This house, this legacy, it isn't yours to destroy. It's my blood, sweat, and tears you've trampled on, all for your own selfish desires." A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of my words sinking in for all to bear witness. I could see the shock and disbelief etched on the faces of those around me, the realization that the perfect family they had envied was nothing but a carefully constructed facade. "I have proof," I continued, holding up the thick manila envelope that contained the damning evidence of Dennis and Joan's misdeeds. Financial records, emails, photographs, all of it documenting the depths of their betrayal. Slowly, I began to circulate the documents, allowing each person to see for themselves the ugly truth that had been hidden for so long. Whispers and gasps of outrage rippled through the crowd, and I knew in that moment that the tide had turned. Dennis stepped forward, his eyes pleading with me for forgiveness. "Maggie, please, let me explain." But I cut him off with a sharp shake of my head. "There's nothing to explain, Dennis. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Turning back to the crowd, I drew myself up to my full height, a newfound sense of strength and resolve coursing through my veins. "This is not the end," I declared, my voice ringing out with conviction. "This is just the beginning. the beginning of a new chapter, one where I reclaim my dignity, my self-worth, and my rightful place in this family. A smattering of applause broke out, growing louder and more fervent as the weight of my words sank in. I could see the respect and admiration in their eyes, a stark contrast to the pity and condescension I had grown so accustomed to. In that moment, I knew that I had won. Not just a battle, but a war against the toxic influences that had sought to diminish and control me for far too long. As I looked around at the faces of those who had rallied to my side, I felt a surge of gratitude and pride. This was my family, my true family. The ones who had seen me at my lowest and still believed in me, still stood by my side. And as for Dennis and Joan, their downfall was inevitable, a consequence of their own selfish actions and misguided priorities. They had lost far more than just their reputations. They had lost the respect and loyalty of those who had once looked up to them. But I had gained something far more precious, my freedom, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I was truly loved and supported by those who mattered most. As I stepped down from the podium, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and determination. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by the chains of manipulation and deceit that had held me captive for far too long. This was my moment, my chance to start anew and rebuild my life on my own terms. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility. After all, the best revenge is living well, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The aftermath of my public confrontation with Dennis and Joan was both exhilarating and exhausting. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, I could feel the weight of years of pent-up anger and resentment finally lifting from my shoulders. "Maggie, over here!" I turned to see Beth waving me over, a broad grin splitting her face. She enveloped me in a fierce hug, her eyes shining with pride. "You were incredible in there," she said, giving my arm a gentle squeeze. "I've never seen you so strong, so confident." A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. I'll admit, it felt pretty damn good to finally stand up to those two. Beth nodded emphatically. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for you to see them for who they really are. That mother-son duo has been nothing but trouble from the start." Her words rang true, and I felt a pang of regret for all the years I had spent making excuses for their behavior, turning a blind eye to the toxicity that had slowly poisoned my life. "Well, no more," I said firmly. "That chapter of my life is over. It's time for me to start fresh, to rebuild on my own terms." Beth beamed at me, her expression a mixture of admiration and relief. "I'm so proud of you, Maggie. You've come such a long way from the woman who used to let Joan walk all over her." I nodded, my mind drifting back to those dark days when Joan's constant belittling had left me feeling small and insignificant. But now, in the wake of my public triumph, I felt a newfound sense of strength and self-worth. "I've learned that true family stands by you, not controls you," I said, squeezing Beth's hand gratefully, "and I'll never let anyone walk over me again." As the weeks passed, I found myself reconnecting with old friends and family members who had rallied to my side during my darkest hours. Their support and encouragement buoyed me, reminding me that I was far from alone in this new chapter of my life. And as for Dennis and Joan, well, let's just say the aftermath of their exposed misdeeds was far from pretty. The once revered family name had been dragged through the mud, their reputations in tatters. I would catch glimpses of them around town, their expressions sullen and defeated, as if the weight of their own actions had finally caught up to them. But I refused to let their downfall consume me. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. I reclaimed my cherished belongings from storage, carefully restoring the warmth and familiarity to the house that had once been my home. And slowly, steadily, I began to heal. Not just from the betrayal, but from years of emotional abuse and manipulation. It wasn't an easy journey, of course. There were moments when the pain and anger threatened to overwhelm me, when the temptation to wallow in bitterness was almost too strong to resist. But each time I would remind myself of how far I had come, of the strength and resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. And as the months passed, something remarkable began to happen. The whispers and sideways glances that had once followed me gradually faded, replaced by nods of respect and admiration. It seemed that my public stand against Dennis and Joan had struck a chord with others who had suffered in silence, and my story had become a beacon of hope for those trapped in their own toxic situations. "It's good to see you back, Maggie," an old acquaintance remarked one day as I passed her in the grocery store. "Stronger than ever." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned that true strength comes from within, and from surrounding yourself with people who truly care about you." As I made my way home, my arms laden with bags of fresh produce and the promise of a new recipe to try, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I had come. The woman I was today was a far cry from the meek, downtrodden soul who had once allowed herself to be defined by the cruelty of others. No, I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her sense of self-worth. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility that had been absent for far too long. This was my life, my story, and I was the author of my own destiny. The road ahead might be long and winding, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by the weight of others' expectations and manipulations. As I stepped through the front door and into the warm embrace of my newly reclaimed home, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning, the first chapter in a story that promised to be filled with adventure, growth, and the kind of hard-won wisdom that can only come from surviving the darkest of storms. And I couldn't wait to see what the future had in store.
I never expected to discover my husband's betrayal during what should have been a normal Sunday brunch. But there I was, frozen in my own hallway, listening to him plot with his parents about how to get his hands on my family's money. My name is Sloan, and until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. I'm a music teacher, married to Reed, who I thought was the love of my life, and mother to our amazing 3-year-old daughter, Lila. My parents built a comfortable life for themselves through hard work, and I've always been proud to follow their example of independence. "She just needs the right push," Reed was saying in our living room, his voice carrying that smooth, confident tone he usually reserved for his sales pitches. "If we can convince her to quit teaching, she'll have to rely more on her parents' support." I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding. Lila was upstairs taking her nap, and I'd just come back from checking on her when I heard them talking. "Darling, you're being too subtle," my mother-in-law Camille's voice dripped with honey-coated venom. "That salon chain her mother runs is worth millions. Sloan needs to understand that her little music teaching career is, well, beneath her potential." Beneath her potential? I mouthed silently, my hands clenching into fists. "It's not that simple," Reed sighed. "Sloan's stubborn about her independence. She gets that from her father." "Well, her father's not getting any younger," Grant, my father-in-law, chimed in. "And neither is her mother. Have you looked into their estate planning?" I felt sick. The conversation continued, but their voices became muffled by the blood rushing in my ears. 3 years of marriage, and I'd never heard Reed talk about me like this. Like I was some puzzle to be solved, a resource to be mined. The worst part? They were discussing my parents' money as if they were already dead. My mom, who still works 60-hour weeks at her salons because she loves what she does. My dad, who still tinkers with new tech innovations in his home office, more alive than ever in his retirement. I must have made some sound because the conversation in the living room suddenly stopped. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and walked in, plastering on my best teacher smile, the one I use when catching students passing notes in class. "Hey everyone," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Having a nice chat?" Reed's face flickered with something. Guilt? Concern? Before settling into his usual charming smile. "Hey, babe. We were just talking about your career." "Oh." I picked up my coffee mug from the side table, needing something to do with my hands. "Anything interesting?" Camille jumped in, all perfectly manicured nails and practice concern. "Darling, we were just discussing how you could have so many more opportunities if you weren't tied down to teaching. With your family's resources." "My family's resources," I interrupted, taking a slow sip of my now cold coffee, "are exactly that. My family's." The room went quiet. Reed shifted in his seat, that familiar crease appearing between his eyebrows, the one that shows up when a sale isn't going his way. "Sloan," he started, but I cut him off with a look. "I think I need some air," I said, setting down my mug with a careful precision that belied the trembling in my hands. "Would you all mind watching Lila for a bit? I just need to clear my head." As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked exactly the same as I had this morning, but everything felt different. The woman staring back at me had just discovered that her marriage might be built on a foundation of lies, and she was already planning what to do about it. The week after I overheard Reed's conversation with his parents, I found myself sitting at my parents' dining table, watching my mother arrange flowers like nothing was wrong with the world. I hadn't told them about what I discovered yet. How do you tell your parents that their son-in-law sees them as a walking investment portfolio? "You're quieter than usual," Mom said, trimming a stem with practiced precision. "Is everything okay with Lila?" "Lila's perfect," I replied, managing a small smile. "She's with Reed at his parents' house." Mom's hands stilled for a moment. "Ah, Camille and Grant's." The way she said their names told me everything I needed to know about her opinion of my in-laws. I should have paid more attention to her instincts 3 years ago. "They're hosting a dinner tonight," I continued, tracing the wood grain of the table with my finger, "to discuss a new business venture." Dad looked up from his tablet, his engineer's mind already clicking into gear. "What kind of venture?" "I don't know yet, but they specifically requested that you and Mom come too." "Did they now?" Mom's voice had that edge to it, the same one she used when dealing with difficult suppliers for her salon chain. "How interesting." The doorbell rang before I could respond. My stomach dropped when I saw Reed through the window, arriving early with his parents in tow. Lila wasn't with them. "Where's Lila?" I asked as soon as they entered. "The nanny's watching her," Reed answered smoothly, kissing my cheek. "We thought it would be better to discuss business, without distractions." I caught the look that passed between my parents. They'd always supported my decision to keep teaching after Lila was born, unlike Camille, who called it playing at having a career. Dinner was a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. Camille praised Mom's cooking while simultaneously suggesting she must be too busy with her little salons to cook often. Grant kept steering the conversation toward retirement planning, while Reed maintained his salesman's smile, watching everyone like he was waiting for the perfect moment to close a deal. "So," Reed finally said, setting down his wine glass, "we wanted to discuss an exciting opportunity. Here it comes, I thought. There's this amazing property development project," he continued. "Premium location, guaranteed returns. But we need initial investors." My father's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten around his fork. "And you're bringing this to us because?" "Because family should help family," Camille jumped in. "And with your resources, it would be such a shame not to." "Our resources," my mother interrupted, "are already allocated to expanding the salon chain. We're opening 3 new locations next month." I watched Reed's face fall slightly before he recovered. "But surely some diversification would be wise? Marlo, your business is successful, but property development could provide much better returns." "Better returns than the business I built from nothing?" Mom's voice could have frozen hell. "The business that put Sloan through college debt-free?" "That's not what Reed meant," Camille said quickly. "We just think." "I know exactly what you think," I cut in, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "You think my parents' money is your safety net. You think my mother's business is just a stepping stone to something better. You think I should quit my job and let my husband handle the finances." The room went dead silent. Reed stared at me, his charm cracking to reveal something darker underneath. "Have you been eavesdropping on private conversations?" "Private conversations about my family's money?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Yes, I heard everything last Sunday. And I've been watching you ever since, waiting to see if you'd come clean. Instead, you brought your parents here to help you pitch this scheme." "Sloan," Reed started, but my father cut him off. "I think it's time for you all to leave," Dad said quietly. His calm tone carried more weight than any shout. As they left, Reed lingered in the doorway. We'll talk about this at home. No, I replied. We won't. Because I'm staying here tonight. With my daughter. You can't just watch me. After they left, I sat between my parents on the couch, feeling like a kid again. Except this time, the monster wasn't under my bed. It was wearing my wedding ring. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Mom squeezed my hand. Don't be sorry. Be smart. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I never meant to become a detective in my own marriage, but there I was at midnight, scrolling through Reed's laptop while he slept upstairs. The house was silent except for the hum of the heating system and my racing heart. What started as a gut feeling led me to his email. The password was still Lila's birthday, something that should have been sweet but now felt like another manipulation. My hands trembled as I clicked through folder after folder, each one revealing another piece of the puzzle I wished I'd never started solving. Oh God, I whispered, staring at a bank statement. The numbers didn't lie. Reed had been hemorrhaging money for months. Failed investments, hidden credit cards, loans I never knew about. But what made my stomach turn was an email thread with his parents about accessing Marlowe's business accounts. The floor creaked behind me. Find what you're looking for? I spun around to find Reed standing in the doorway, his face half hidden in shadow. He didn't look angry. Worse, he looked calculating. How long have you been planning to steal from my mother's business? My voice was steady, despite the tremor in my hands. Steal is such an ugly word. He stepped into the room, running a hand through his sleet-messed hair. I prefer to think of it as redistributing family resources. Family resources? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the business my mother built from nothing? The one she worked 18-hour days for? The one that could save us? He slammed his hand on the desk, making me jump. Do you know what it's like, living in the shadow of your family's success? Having everyone compare me to your father? So, this is about your ego? This is about survival. He leaned closer, his charm completely gone now. I'm drowning here, Sloan. The property development deal fell through. I owe people money. How much? More than you want to know. I stood up slowly, putting distance between us. And you thought the solution was to steal from my mother? I thought the solution was to use available resources to stop. I held up my hand. Just stop with the sales pitch. For once in your life, be honest. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the facade. Fine. You want honest? I'm broke. Everything I built is gone. And your parents? They're sitting on a fortune while watching me fail. They worked for that fortune. And I worked too. His voice rose, making me glance nervously at the ceiling, thinking of Lila. But nothing I do is ever enough. Not for them. Not for my parents, not for you. Don't you dare make this about me, I hissed. I loved you. I supported you. I never once asked about money. Exactly. He laughed bitterly. You never had to ask about money. You've always had it as a safety net. Must be nice. I opened my email and started forwarding myself copies of everything I'd found. Reed watched me, his jaw tightening. What are you doing? Protecting my family. I met his eyes. You have 12 hours to tell my parents everything or I will. And believe me, you'd rather it come from you. You're bluffing. Try me. I grabbed my phone and headed for the stairs. I'm getting Lila. He caught my arm. It's the middle of the night. Let go of me. My voice was ice. Or the first call I make won't be to my parents. It'll be to the police. His hand dropped. As I packed a bag for Lila, I could hear him pacing downstairs, making phone calls in hushed, angry tones. I knew he was calling his parents, probably trying to damage control. Let them try. 20 minutes later, I was buckling a sleepy Lila into her car seat. Reed stood in the doorway, watching us. This isn't over, he said. You're right, I replied, starting the car. It's just beginning. As I drove through the dark streets toward my parents' house, Lila dozed in the back seat. I caught glimpses of her in the rearview mirror, so innocent, so unaware of how her world was about to change. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my resolve strengthening. Reed was right about one thing. This wasn't over. but he had no idea what was coming next. They say bad news comes in threes. I just never expected all three to hit within 24 hours. The first came at dawn, when my lawyer called to tell me Reed had already withdrawn half our savings. Legal, since both our names were on the account, but devastating nonetheless. I sat in my parents' guest room, watching Lila sleep while my hands shook around my phone. The second blow landed at noon. Mom collapsed at one of her salons. Stroke, the doctor said in the sterile hospital hallway. She's stable, but the next 48 hours are critical. I stood there, numb, as Dad gripped my hand. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The third hit just before midnight. A text from an unknown number. Thought you should see this. Attached was a photo of Reed leaving a hotel with Camille, carrying documents. The timestamp showed it was taken just hours after I'd left with Lila. I was still staring at my phone when Dad came back from the coffee machine. The vultures are already circling, he said quietly, handing me a cup. Reed's been calling the salon managers, trying to get financial information. How did you? Maria called. She's worked with your mother for 15 years. She knows something's wrong. He sat heavily in the plastic chair beside me. They all do. A nurse walked past, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Through the window of Mom's room, I could see her lying there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The woman who taught me to stand on my own 2 feet couldn't even breathe without machines. Dad, I started, but my voice cracked. I know. He pulled out his tablet, pulling up documents I recognized from Mom's office. Your mother and we've been expecting something like this. Not this exactly, but what do you mean? We've seen the way Reed and his parents look at what we've built, like it's their backup plan. His fingers moved across the screen, entering passwords. Your mother made some changes last month. Transferred majority control of the salons to you. The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. She what? She said she had a feeling. He smiled sadly. She always did have good instincts about people. A commotion at the nurse's station made us both look up. Reed was there, arguing with security, Camille hovering behind him with her perfect makeup and predatory eyes. Sir, only family is allowed, the guard was saying. I am family, Reed's voice carried down the hall. That's my mother-in-law in there. I stood up, my body moving before my brain could catch up. Dad grabbed my arm. Let security handle it.
No.
I handed him my coffee. I need to end this now. Reed saw me coming and switched on his concerned husband act. Sloan, baby, I've been so worried. Save it. I stopped just out of reach. I saw the hotel photos. His face flickered with surprise before settling into righteous indignation. You're having me followed? Apparently someone else is. I glanced at Camille, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. What documents were you reviewing with your mother at the Grand Hotel? That's private business. Nothing about my family's business is private to you anymore. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You have exactly one chance to walk away with your dignity intact. Leave now, or I release everything I found on your laptop to every investor you've ever worked with. Camille grabbed his arm. Reed, let's go. But he shook her off, his mask finally cracking. You think you can threaten me? I know things too. Things about your father's tech patents, about what? Dad's voice came from behind me, steady and cold. Please, enlighten us about my business, Reed. I'm very interested in hearing what you think you know. The security guard stepped closer. Sir, I need you to leave. For a moment, I thought Reed might actually try to fight. But then his shoulders slumped, and I saw him clearly for the first time, a scared little boy playing at being a businessman, drowning in his own lies. This isn't over, he said, but the threat sounded hollow. Actually, it is. I turned back toward Mom's room. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. As they were escorted out, I heard Camille hissing at Reed, but I didn't bother listening. I had more important things to focus on, like protecting what my mother had built, like being the daughter she always believed I could be, like making sure the people who tried to destroy my family never got another chance. The salon mirrors reflected my mother's empty office chair as I sorted through the mess Reed had left behind. 3 days after her stroke, and I was already finding holes in the business accounts, small at first, then larger, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading to something worse. MS. Sloan. Maria, our head stylist, appeared in the doorway. They're here again. I didn't need to ask who they were. Through the glass walls, I could see Camille and Grant in the waiting area, dressed like they were heading to a board meeting instead of a beauty salon. Send them in. I kept my eyes on the computer screen, making them wait as I finished reviewing another suspicious transaction. Sloan, darling. Camille's perfume arrived before she did. We've been trying to reach you. I've been busy discovering what your son did to my mother's business. I finally looked up. Would you like to explain these transfer authorizations with your signature on them? Grant shifted uncomfortably. Now, Sloan, business is complicated. Theft usually is. I turned the screen toward them. Did you think no one would notice? That my mother would just write it off as a family favor? Your mother understood the importance of family, Camille said, her voice sharp. Unlike you, apparently. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Family? Is that what you call embezzlement these days? We prefer to think of it as a temporary reallocation. Grant pulled out a folder. Actually, we have a proposal that could solve everyone's problems. The only problem I have is sitting in front of me. Camille leaned forward, her designer bracelet catching the light. Your mother's in the hospital, Sloan. The business needs strong leadership. Reed has experience. Reed has experience stealing from it. I stood up, my chair rolling back. And now I know you helped him. Be reasonable, Grant pleaded. We can make this go away. Sign over controlling interest to Reed, and we'll forget about pressing charges for the irregularities we found in your father's tech patents. My blood ran cold. What irregularities? Camille smiled, all teeth and triumph. Let's just say Reed did his homework. It would be a shame if the patent office received an anonymous tip about your father's early development processes. The pieces clicked together. Reed's late nights researching, his sudden interest in Dad's old projects. They'd been planning this for months. Get out. My voice was steady, despite the rage building in my chest. Think about Lila, Camille pressed. About her future. About what a messy legal battle would do to her. Something in me snapped. I picked up my mother's heavy glass paperweight, turning it over in my hands. You know what my mother told me about building this business? She said sometimes you have to be willing to break things to build them stronger. I brought the paperweight down on the corner of her desk, cracking the glass surface. They both jumped. That was your first warning. I set the paperweight down carefully. Here's your second. I have copies of everything. Every transfer, every forged signature, every reallocation. One phone call, and it all goes to the FBI. You wouldn't, Grant stammered. Think about Reed. I am thinking about Reed. I'm thinking about how good he'll look in orange. I walked to the door, holding it open. You have 24 hours to return every penny, or I start making calls. And if you ever mention my daughter again, I'll make sure the only way you see her is through prison visiting room glass. After they scurried out, Maria appeared with a cup of tea. Your mother would be proud, she said quietly. I looked at the cracked desk, thinking of Mom lying in that hospital bed, of Dad poring over his old patents, of Lila asking why she couldn't go home. No, I replied, picking up my phone. Not yet, but she will be. I dialed my lawyer's number, watching Camille and Grant hurry to their car through the salon windows. They thought they could use my family against me? Fine. Time to show them exactly what kind of woman my mother raised. Time to make them regret ever hearing the name Sloan. The divorce papers sat untouched on Reed's desk while he paced his office like a caged animal. I'd chosen this moment carefully, after hours, when his staff had gone home. But before he could escape to whatever hotel he was hiding in these days. You can't be serious. He picked up the papers, then dropped them like they burned. After everything we've built. You mean after everything you've stolen? I stayed standing, keeping the desk between us. The salon accounts, my father's patents, our savings? I was trying to save us. He slammed his hands on the desk. Your parents have been holding us back, controlling everything with their money. The only one trying to control anything is you. I pushed the papers toward him. Sign them. He laughed, a harsh sound that made me flinch. Or what? You'll tell Daddy? Have him sue me? Go ahead. I'll drag every skeleton out of his closet. Every shortcut he took building his precious tech empire. You're bluffing. Am I? He pulled out his phone, showing me documents I'd never seen before. Your father wasn't as clean as you think. Want to know how many corners he cut? How many people he stepped on? My hands started shaking. Those are fake. The patent office won't think so. His smile turned cruel. Neither will his investors. One anonymous tip, and it all comes crashing down. You destroy him just to hurt me? I destroy him to protect what's mine. He stepped around the desk. Including you. I backed away, bumping into the wall. I was never yours to own. No. He moved closer. Then why did you marry me? Because you loved me? Or because your parents approved of my pedigree, my connections? Stop it. Face it, Sloane. You're just like me. Playing the game, using people. I'm nothing like you. Really? He grabbed my wrist as I tried to leave. Then why are you here alone? Why didn't you bring your lawyer? Because you thought you could manipulate me, just like your mother taught you. I yanked my arm free. Don't talk about my mother. Poor Marlowe, he continued, his voice mocking. All those years building her empire, and now she can't even speak to defend it. How long before the board pushes you out? A month? A week? Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the nearest object, a crystal award from his desk, and hurled it at the wall. The crash was satisfying, but not as satisfying as the way he jumped. You want to talk about manipulation? My voice shook with rage. Let's talk about how you and your parents planned this from the beginning. How you married me for my family's money. How you... The office door opened. Camille stood there, looking perfectly composed despite the late hour. I thought I heard voices. She glanced at the shattered crystal. Having a disagreement? Get out, I spat. I'm afraid I can't do that. She held up her phone. Not when I have such interesting security footage of you assaulting my son. My blood ran cold.
What?
You throwing things, threatening him. She clicked her tongue. Not very maternal behavior. I wonder what a judge would think about Lila's safety with such an unstable mother. The room spun. They'd planned this too. The confrontation, the security footage, everything. You wouldn't dare use my daughter against me. Try us. Reed's voice was soft, dangerous. Sign over your controlling interest in the salons, and we forget this happened. Fight us, and you'll lose everything. The business, your father's reputation, and Lila. I looked between them, mother and son, so alike in their calculated cruelty. All my careful plans, my evidence of their theft, meant nothing if they could paint me as unstable, dangerous. I'll give you 24 hours to decide, Camille said, as if offering a generous gift. Choose wisely. They left me there, surrounded by shattered crystal and broken dreams. My phone buzzed, a text from Dad about Mom's condition worsening. Another from my lawyer warning about Reed's countersuit. I slid down the wall, the divorce papers scattered around me like fallen leaves. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had no idea how to fight back. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let them win. Not just for me, but for Lila. For Mom. For everything our family had built. I just had to figure out how. The moment I walked into Reed's parents' house, I knew something was wrong. The place was too quiet, too still, like a trap waiting to be sprung. I found them in the study, Reed, Camille, and Grant, arranged like a tribunal behind the massive oak desk. The security footage from Reed's office played silently on a laptop between them. Where's Lila? I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Safe, Camille replied. With the nanny. We thought it best to handle this professionally. I set my own laptop on the desk. Funny.
I was thinking the same thing.
Reed's smirk faltered when I opened it, revealing a video chat window. Maria's face appeared, along with my father's lawyer and, most surprisingly, Grant's former business partner, Thomas. Hello, Grant, Thomas said, his voice crackling through the speakers.
Been a while.
Grant's face went pale. What is this? This, I said, pulling out a USB drive, is everything. The real records from the salon accounts. Dad's original patent documentation. And something really interesting from Thomas about some creative accounting you and Reed did at your old firm.
Camille stood up sharply.
You're bluffing. Like you were bluffing about that security footage? I played my own recording from my phone, which had captured the entire setup at Reed's office. Amazing what modern phones can do, isn't it? Reed lunged for my laptop, but I was faster, stepping back. Don't bother. It's all backed up. And if anything happens to me or Lila, it goes straight to the FBI. You destroy your own family? Reed's voice cracked. Your daughter's future?
No, Reed.
I'm saving it. From you. We can still work this out, Camille interjected, her perfectly manicured hands spreading in a placating gesture. We're family. Family? I laughed. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't use a 3-year-old as leverage. Family doesn't. Oh, spare us the moral high ground, Reed snapped. You're just like us, using whatever advantage you can get. The difference is, I'm not doing this for money. I turned to Thomas. Show them. Thomas shared his screen, displaying financial records that made Grant audibly gasp. This is what they really took from your mother's business, Sloan. And this. More documents appeared. This is what they were planning to do next. The room went silent except for the hum of the laptop fans. I watched their faces as they realized just how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered them. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out a stack of papers. You're going to sign these, all of you. Full confession of the theft, immediate repayment of everything you took, and a legally binding agreement to stay away from my family's businesses forever. And if we refuse? Camille's voice trembled slightly. Then Thomas sends everything to the SEC. I'm sure they'd be very interested in Grant's creative accounting methods. And Reed. I met his eyes. Those investors you scammed? They're very eager to talk to the FBI. Reed slumped in his chair, the fight draining from him. You've been planning this all along. I learned from the best. I pushed the papers toward them. You taught me how to play the long game, remember? One by one, they signed. Even Camille, though her hand shook with barely suppressed rage. As Thomas and the lawyer witnessed the signatures virtually, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. One more thing, I said, pulling out the divorce papers. Full custody of Lila. Non-negotiable. Reed stared at the papers for a long moment. Can I still see her? Supervised visits. If you get help, real help, not just playing the victim. He signed without another word. As I packed up my laptop, Grant spoke for the first time. What happens now? I paused at the door.
Now?
You get to experience what it's like to build something honest for once. To earn what you have. I looked at each of them in turn. Consider it a gift. More than you gave my family. I left them there, surrounded by the ruins of their schemes, and went to collect my daughter. It wasn't the revenge I'd originally wanted, but it was something better, justice, with a chance for redemption. Mom would have approved. 6 months later, I stood in my mother's renovated office, watching the sunset paint the salon windows gold. The place hummed with the familiar sounds of hair dryers and quiet conversation, a symphony Mom had conducted for decades. MS. Sloan. Maria appeared in the doorway. Your 4 o'clock is here. I checked my watch, surprised. Send him in. Reed looked different. Thinner, less polished. The designer suits were gone, replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. He carried a thick folder and something else I couldn't quite see. Thanks for meeting me, he said, hovering in the doorway like a stranger, which I supposed he now was. Lila's excited about the zoo tomorrow, I offered, keeping things neutral. The supervised visits had been going well, better than I'd expected. He nodded, then placed the folder on my desk. I've been doing some research about small business loans, specifically for salon expansions. There's a program that could help with those 3 new locations you're planning. I stared at him. Why? Because I owe you. More than money. He shifted uncomfortably. I've been working with a financial advisor, helping other people avoid the mistakes I made. It's good work. Honest work. And your parents? Haven't spoken to them since the divorce. They're in Florida now, trying to rebuild with what's left.
He paused.
I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sloan. Just a chance to do something right for once. I opened the folder, scanning the carefully organized documents. The research was thorough, professional, exactly what the business needed. Why now? Because Lila asked me something at our last visit. He pulled out what he'd been holding, a framed photo of Mom cutting the ribbon at her first salon opening. She wanted to know if her grandmother was a superhero because of how you talk about her. My throat tightened. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That her grandmother built something amazing, and that her mother is even stronger for protecting it.
He set the photo on my desk.
I found this in my parents' storage. Thought it belonged here instead. I picked up the photo, remembering that day. I'd been 12, watching Mom shine with pride as she built her dream from nothing. Just like I was doing now. The loan program, I said finally. Is it legitimate? Completely. I'll send all the information to your lawyer first. No strings, no involvement from me unless you want it. I studied him, this new version of Reed, humbled but somehow more real than the polished salesman I'd married. I'll think about it. He turned to leave, then stopped. You know what the hardest part was? Realizing I had everything I needed already. A family, a home, love. I just couldn't see it through my own greed. And now I see clearly. He smiled sadly. Too late, but clearly. After he left, I sat at Mom's old desk, my desk now, and looked at the photo. The setting sun caught the glass, reflecting my own face over hers. Different women, different battles, same determination. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Mom squeezed my hand today. Doctors say it's a good sign. I smiled, touching the frame gently. Maybe Reed wasn't the only one getting a second chance. Maria knocked softly. The staff meeting's ready. We're discussing the expansion plans. I stood, straightening my jacket. Actually, I have some new information to share about that. From Reed's proposal? Maybe. I picked up the folder. But this time, we'll do it our way. The right way. As I walked into the conference room, I caught my reflection in the salon mirrors, not just Mom's daughter anymore, but my own person. Someone who could protect what mattered while still leaving room for growth, for change, for redemption. Even for those who might not deserve it. Because that's what real strength is, not just knowing how to fight, but knowing when to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. And we were just getting started. Hey everyone, I'm Brielle, your typical 28-year-old city girl living the dream in Chicago with a cozy marketing job. Life was sweet, or so I thought. Then my grandpa passed away and everything changed. Growing up, I spent every summer on Grandpa's farm in rural Illinois. Those were some of the best days. Running through cornfields, chasing chickens, and sneaking extra slices of Grandma's apple pie. Grandpa would always wink at me, saying, "Our little secret, Maybear." But there was tension, too. My Uncle Randall, Aunt Linda, and cousins Ryan and Chloe lived nearby, and whenever they visited, the mood shifted. Grandpa would get quiet, and I'd overhear hushed arguments like, "Randall, you can't keep asking for advances on your inheritance. It's my birthright, Dad. You owe me." At the time, I didn't understand. Now? Oh, I get it. Last week, we were all packed into a stuffy lawyer's office for Grandpa's will reading. I was trying to hold back tears, missing him something fierce. Then the lawyer announced, "To my granddaughter Brielle, I leave my entire farm and all its assets." You could have heard a pin drop. Then all hell broke loose. "This is ridiculous." Uncle Randall shot up, face red as a tomato. "Dad promised me that farm." Aunt Linda screeched like a barn owl. "She doesn't know the first thing about farming. She'll ruin it." Ryan and Chloe glared at me like I'd robbed them. Real family love, right? I was in shock. A whole farm?
Me?
A city girl who can barely keep a houseplant alive? But then, a strange excitement bubbled up inside me. Grandpa believed in me. He trusted me with his legacy. "I'll do it," I heard myself say. "I'll run the farm." Uncle Randall laughed, a nasty, mocking sound. You, little Miss Manicure? You won't last a week. My hands shook, but I held his gaze. Watch me. As we left, I heard Ryan muttering to Chloe, Dad has to fix this. No way we're letting her take what's ours. I should have been scared, but instead, I felt fired up. Grandpa saw something in me, and I was going to prove him right. Driving back to Chicago, my mind was spinning. How do you even start running a farm? What about my job, my life? But I remembered Grandpa's words from my last visit. Brielle, sometimes life throws you a curveball. You just gotta grab that bat and swing. Well, Grandpa, here goes nothing. Packing up my life felt like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. But no guts, no glory, right? I walked into my boss's office, took a deep breath, and dropped the bomb. I need a leave of absence. I inherited a farm. Her jaw practically hit the floor. A farm? A week later, I pulled up to the farmhouse in my little sedan, feeling like a fish out of water. Before I could even grab my bags, here came Uncle Randall stomping across the yard. Well, look who thinks she can play farmer, he sneered. Nice to see you too, Uncle Randall, I said, keeping it civil. This isn't some petting zoo, girl. You're in over your head. I brushed past him, lugging my suitcase. Thanks for the welcome, but I'll manage. If only that was the worst of it. The next morning, I found a huge hole cut in the main pasture fence, cows everywhere. I was running around in my pajamas, herding cows like a city girl rodeo. And it just kept coming, tractor tires slashed, chicken coop doors left open, every day something new. One night, I overheard Ryan and Chloe whispering behind the barn. Dad says we gotta step it up, Ryan said. Make her life hell till she gives up and sells. What if she doesn't?
Chloe asked.
Then we get creative. Nobody would blame her if she had an accident out here all alone. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just family squabbling anymore. This was dangerous. I went to Sheriff Harris. No relation, unfortunately, but he laughed it off. Sounds like typical new farmer troubles. You sure you're cut out for this, little ladies? With no help from him, I was at my wit's end. When my boyfriend, Ethan, came to visit, I thought finally some support, but after just one day of nonstop chaos, he broke down. Brielle, this is insane. Just sell the damn place and come back to Chicago. I can't, Ethan. This was Grandpa's legacy. Well, I didn't sign up for this trauma. Call me when you come to your senses. And just like that, he was gone. I cried myself to sleep that night, feeling more alone than ever. But the real blow came a few days later. I finally lined up a meeting with some big Purdue buyers, a chance to turn things around. The night before, I went to check on the animals one last time when, wham, someone shoved me into the barn and slammed the door. Hey, let me out. I screamed, pounding on the door, but it was padlocked from the outside. I spent the whole night trapped, missing my big meeting. When I finally got out the next morning, filthy and exhausted, I seriously considered throwing in the towel. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Then, in the corner of the barn, something caught my eye, a faint glint from beneath a pile of old tools. Curiosity took over, and I went to check it out. What I found changed everything. I stumbled into the house, grabbed my suitcase, and started shoving in clothes. They win, I muttered, wiping away angry tears. I can't do this anymore. But as I was clearing out the attic, looking for some old photos to remember Grandpa by, I noticed something odd, a floorboard that didn't quite fit. I pried it up, and beneath it was a hidden compartment with a dusty journal and a stack of legal papers. My hands shook as I opened the journal. It was Grandpa's handwriting. Oh my God, I whispered. As I read entry after entry, the truth was all there. Years of Uncle Randall embezzling from the farm, cooking the books, and squeezing Grandpa for more money. And the papers? A real will. Not the one from the lawyer's office. This one clearly stated the farm was meant for me, always. But there was more. Mixed in with the farm records were notes on a shady real estate scheme Uncle Randall had been involved in. It looked like he was buying up land to flip for massive profits, and not exactly legally. I realized I needed help. This was way beyond anything I'd ever dealt with. That's when I remembered Lily, a friend I'd met in town. I took a chance and called her, praying she'd pick up. Lily, it's Brielle from the Harris farm. I need your help. It's big. Bless her. She came right over. We spread everything out on the kitchen table, and her eyes grew wide. Brielle, this is huge. Your uncle could go to jail for this. So what do we do? I asked. A glint sparked in Lily's eyes. We play it smart. Make them think they've won, then hit them where it hurts. We stayed up all night plotting and planning. By morning, we had a game plan that would make any strategist proud. Step 1. Make them think I was leaving for good. I waited until I knew Uncle Randall would be watching, then started loading up my car, putting on my best defeated face. Right on cue, he swaggered over. Finally saw sense, huh? Knew you couldn't hack it. I forced myself to look defeated. You were right, Uncle Randall. I'm not cut out for this. The farm's all yours. Damn straight it is. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, princess. It took everything I had not to slap the smug look off his face. Instead, I got in my car and drove off, watching his little victory dance in my rearview mirror. Little did he know I was just heading to Lily's to lay low. For the next 2 weeks, Lily and I worked nonstop. We dug deeper into Uncle Randall's shady dealings, following every lead like unraveling the world's most corrupt sweater. One night, Lily pointed at her laptop, shaking her head. Look at this. Your uncle's name is all over these land purchases. He's been hiding behind shell companies. I whistled. Go big or go home, huh, Uncle Randall's? Once we had enough evidence to sink a battleship, we made the call to the state police, the FBI, the works. They were on it in a heartbeat. Then came the day of reckoning, the annual Harris family barbecue. I showed up like nothing was wrong, all smiles and hugs. Uncle Randall sneered, beer in hand. Look who came crawling back. I smiled sweetly. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Uncle Randall. When everyone gathered around the picnic tables, I stood up, my heart pounding. I'd like to make a toast to family and to justice. That's when I pulled out Grandpa's real will, his journals, and all the evidence we gathered. Uncle Randall's face went from red to white in a heartbeat. You little, he snarled, lunging for the documents. Go ahead, Uncle Randall. Destroy them. I've got copies. Lots of copies. Right on cue. Police sirens sounded in the distance. Uncle Randall looked like he was going to be sick as state troopers walked up. Randall Harris, one of them said, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The backyard was chaos. Aunt Linda was screeching. Ryan and Chloe were trying to run. Spoiler alert, they didn't get far, and even the crooked sheriff was sputtering excuses as he got cuffed. After the dust settled, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I hired pros who knew farming inside and out, then put my marketing skills to use, rebranding the whole operation as Harris Family Farms, where tradition meets innovation. Fast forward a year, and we were the talk of the state. Organic produce, farm-to-table events, the works. Ryan and Chloe tried crawling back, all apologies and newfound family loyalty. I shut that down real quick. And here I am tonight, hosting our first big farm-to-table dinner. Fairy lights are strung up in the old barn, and long tables are piled high with food we grew ourselves. As I stand up to welcome everyone, I catch a glimpse of Grandpa's old photo on the wall, that familiar mischievous smile of his beaming back at me. I could almost hear his voice. Atta girl, Brielle Bear. You showed them what you're made of. Raising my glass, I grin from ear to ear. To new beginnings, and to those who believed in us. Cheers, everyone. Glasses clink, laughter flows, and I know, deep down, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. Uncle Randall and his crew? They're yesterday's news. This farm and I, we're the future. And let me tell you, it's looking mighty bright from where I'm standing.